Most gardeners spend hundreds of dollars a year on soil maintenance. The insects already living in your soil are doing the same thing for free. The question is, what do they want in return?
Wow, look at them
This morning you went
all.
outside.
They're so
Maybe you
busy.
watered. Maybe you pulled out a weed or two.
I've never seen
Maybe you
so
just stood there
many.
for a moment with your coffee, looking at the garden and thinking about what needed to be done. You probably felt you were in control. You felt the garden was yours, that your decisions, your seed choices, your fertilizer purchases were keeping it alive. You weren't wrong, but you weren't entirely right either, because 6 inches below where you stood, something else was already working. Something that didn't consult your planning schedule, something that didn't wait for spring, something that was running a quiet, productive, highly developed operation in your soil before you planted your first seed. And it didn't stop even once. Right now, there are insects in your garden. Not just a few, thousands, maybe tens of thousands, depending on how long you've been gardening, how much leaf litter you leave around the edges, how often you work the soil, and they're not there by accident. They're there because without you realizing it, your garden has become exactly what they're looking for. And in fact, they are the visible and invisible heroes of your garden. Let's take a closer look. What do you think? Do you think having insects in the garden is good or bad? Let us know in the comments. Here's what nobody tells you when you buy your first bag of potting mix. Your garden isn't just a place where plants grow, it's a system. A layered, interconnected, brutally efficient system that was running long before gardens existed. And beetles figured that out about 300 million years before you started gardening. 300 million years. Let that sit for a second. Beetles were already optimizing soil ecosystems when dinosaurs didn't exist yet. When the land masses that became your country were still pressed together in one giant continent. They have had 300 million years to get this right. And what they built in your soil reflects exactly that. The first thing you need to understand is this: beetles don't move into your soil. You moved into theirs. Ground beetles, rove beetles, scarab beetles, different species, different sizes, different roles, but all of them running quiet operations in the dark while you sleep, while you plan your planting schedule, while you wonder why some corners of your garden grow better than others, while you stand there with your coffee thinking you're in charge. And here's the part that's going to change how you look at your soil forever. Those better corners, the ones where your tomatoes always seem stronger, where the lettuce comes back thicker every year, where things just seem to work without you doing anything special. There's a very good chance beetles are responsible. Not your fertilizer, not the way you water, not luck. Beetles. Specifically, what beetles have been quietly building in that corner of your soil for the past several seasons. Here's why. Ground beetles are predators. Pure, efficient, relentless predators. Every night, while your garden sits dark and quiet, while you're inside watching television or asleep in bed, they're hunting. Aphid eggs buried in the soil before they hatch, slug larvae moving toward your seedlings, cutworms that would have taken out an entire row of young plants by morning, caterpillar eggs tucked into the surface layer, all of it targeted, all of it eliminated, all of it happening without you setting a single trap or spraying a single thing. A single ground beetle can consume hundreds of pest insects in one season. Hundreds. One beetle. Now, multiply that by the thousands living in a healthy garden soil. You are looking at a pest control operation that no product on the market can replicate. And it runs itself. Every night. For free. But here's what makes ground beetles genuinely remarkable. They don't just hunt randomly, they patrol. Each ground beetle maintains a territory. A specific section of your garden that it covers repeatedly throughout the night. It learns the terrain. It knows where the slug trails are. It knows which spots near the water source attract the most larvae. It builds, in a very real sense, a working map of your garden floor, and it updates that map every single night. Sound familiar? But that's just the hunters. And the hunters are only one layer. Below them, deeper in the soil, something slower and stranger is happening. Scarab beetles, the ones most people associate with ancient Egypt, with golden amulets and mythology, are living in your garden right now. Not the large ones, smaller species, dozens of them, whose larvae spend months curled in the dark, eating. And what they're eating is the stuff your garden produces that you can't use. Dead roots, decaying organic matter, the biological residue of last season. They break it down. They process it. They turn it into a form that your plants can actually absorb through their roots. They are, in a very literal sense, feeding your garden from underneath while you feed it from above. And most gardeners, when they find a white grub curled in their soil, panic. They reach for a treatment, they try to eliminate it, not knowing that what they're holding is one of the most efficient composting organisms on the planet. not knowing that killing it means that section of soil just lost one of its primary breakdown processors. Now add the row of beetles. Fast, thin, almost impossible to see unless you're specifically looking. Rove beetles work the top layer, the thin film of moisture and microorganisms just beneath the surface. They go after fungus gnats whose larvae destroy roots from below. They hunt mites that damage plant tissue. They target harmful nematodes, microscopic worms that attack root systems and collapse plants from the inside out. You've probably never seen a rove beetle. Most gardeners haven't. But if your plants have survived root-level threats you never identified, there's a reasonable chance a rove beetle was involved. 3 different beetles. 3 completely different jobs. 3 different layers of your soil being managed simultaneously. All of it happening 6 inches below where you're standing right now. Here's where it gets complicated, because beetles don't just help. They also need something, and what they need is something most modern gardening practices actively destroy. They need stability. Beetles build their lives around consistent soil structure. Their tunnels, which also aerate your soil and help water penetrate deeper, take weeks to construct. Their egg chambers are placed at specific depths based on temperature and moisture. Their hunting territories are established over multiple seasons. Everything they do assumes the ground beneath them will still be there tomorrow. And then spring comes, and most gardeners till. Here's what tilling actually does to your beetle population, not what it looks like it does. What it actually does: it collapses every tunnel. It exposes every egg chamber to surface temperature, to birds, to frost. It destroys the micro-layering that separates the hunters from the composters from the cleanup crew. It takes a system that took multiple seasons to establish and reduces it to randomly distributed soil particles in a single afternoon. 1 afternoon with a tiller, 2 full years of ecosystem recovery. That's the actual exchange you're making. 2 years of free pest control, 2 years of natural aeration, 2 years of organic matter breakdown, 2 years of root protection, gone, and your garden will still grow afterward. Plants don't immediately fail. The soil looks fine, looks better actually, all loose and fresh. So you never make the connection. You never connect that afternoon to the aphid explosion 3 weeks later. You never connect the tilling to the compacted corner that stopped producing the way it used to. You never see the relationship because the beetles don't send a signal. They don't stage a protest, they just quietly disappear, and the work they were doing quietly stops. And here is the part that genuinely changes how you think about your role in your own garden. You are not the primary caretaker of your soil. You never were. You are a surface-level participant in a system that runs mostly without you. The question isn't how to take better care of your soil. The question is how to stop accidentally damaging a system that was already taking care of itself. Because here is what 300 million years of optimization looks like. It looks like your garden on a good year. The year everything seemed to come together without you doing anything differently. The year the pests were manageable and the soil stayed loose and the plants came back stronger than the season before. That wasn't luck. That was a beetle population operating at full capacity in undisturbed soil. So what can you actually do with this? First, if you till, go shallow. 2 inches instead of 8. You break the surface crust, you let air and water in, but you don't demolish what's living below. The tunnels survive, the egg chambers survive, the beetle population survives. Your soil ecosystem stays intact and keeps working. Second, leave the leaf litter at the edges. The pile you've been meaning to clean up since October. The dead leaves against the fence. The debris in the corner by the shed. Ground beetles overwinter in that material. They use it as insulated cover between hunts. They lay eggs near it. Removing it in early spring means removing your beetle population right at the moment they're most useful to you. Leave the mess. It's doing something. Third, reduce or eliminate broad-spectrum pesticides in your soil, even the ones marketed as safe for plants. Many of them are not selective. They don't distinguish between the pest you're targeting and the ground beetle hunting that pest every night. You eliminate the threat and the predator simultaneously. Then the next generation of the threat arrives with no predator waiting for it. Fourth, go outside at night with a flashlight and actually look at your soil. Not because you need to do anything. Just look. Kneel down near your oldest beds and watch the surface for 30 seconds. You will see them, moving fast, purposeful, deliberate. Once you see a ground beetle hunting, you cannot unsee it. Your garden stops being a collection of plants and dirt and starts being what it actually is. A living system. A system that was already working before you arrived and will keep working after you're gone, if you let it. Here's what your soil already knows that you don't. It doesn't need more treatment. It doesn't need another amendment or another product or another intervention. It needs less interference. It needs consistency. It needs the kind of patience that's hard to practice when you're standing in a garden that looks like it could use something done to it. The beetles in your garden right now are running a maintenance operation that took 300 million years to develop. They don't need your help. They need you to stop accidentally ending it. That's the whole thing. That's the entire job description for a gardener who actually wants their soil to thrive. Get out of the way of what's already working. Tomorrow morning, when you walk out to your garden, stop before you reach for anything. Stop before you water, before you weed, before you plan what needs doing. Just look at the soil near your oldest plants, the darkest patches, the corners that seem to take care of themselves year after year. Something is living there. Something that has been working for you, specifically for your garden, since before you knew it existed. You walked out this morning thinking the garden was yours, thinking you were the one keeping it alive. And in some ways you are, but in the ways that matter most, the ways that happen in the dark, 6 inches down, in the tunnels and chambers and hunting routes that your beetles have spent seasons building, the garden has been keeping itself alive. It just needed you to show up with water and seeds and enough trust to leave the rest alone. Now you know what's down there. Now you know what it's doing. The question is whether you'll let it keep going. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found a beetle in your garden and not known what you were looking at? Most people have. They just didn't know what they were holding. Nature is running quietly underneath everything. Learn to see it. I'll see you in the next one.